Mr. Dan Cowell. Mr. Cowell, should the Board of Aldermen, well, Frederick's growing, right? It's getting bigger all the time. It's going to be almost a third bigger in the next couple of decades. Do you think it's time the Board of Aldermen's position be changed to full-time with a commensurate pay raise to better engage and represent city residents? And should the board have its own legislative staff? And finally, if you support it remaining part-time, how will you juggle the full-time demands of the workload, a job, and a family?
Excellent question. And the city of Frederick is growing. I don't have specific data on how fast the city is growing, but we've grown significantly since I was a youth. I would support the Board of Aldermen being a full-time position if the citizens of Frederick wanted that to be the case. The mayor has a full-time job, and his job assignment includes him or her to meet with the citizens, meet with the committees, and make certain that good policy is happening. The board should not have their own staff if they're full-time. I think that if you accept the job, you should be able to handle the job and its assignments. And it's just like a regular job. I work in the private sector. I work 40 hours a week, sometimes 50 hours a week. I have a 9-month-old son and a wife of 2+ years, and you manage to juggle the two assignments. It'd be no different than a full-time job in the Board of Aldermen.
Thank you very much. Would anybody care to use their 30 seconds to address the question? In that case, we'll move on to Phil Dacey. Mr. Dacey, winter is almost upon us, with about 250 to 350 people sleeping rough on the streets of Frederick, camped out in the county's woods on any given night. What more can be done, if anything, to support the city's homeless, and not just the homeless, the unemployed and the working poor?
Well, I do think the time that has come that Frederick needs to have a conversation about having a full weather homeless shelter. I do think that we should partner with the county in looking at the ability to put in a homeless shelter. You know, there's a lot of things that I think we could bring to Frederick. Some other successful strategies around the state have included Homeless Resource Day to help individuals. Homelessness is not just a single-faceted problem, it's a multifaceted problem. Homeless Resource Day would be a low-impact way a low-cost way of bringing a lot of resources under the same roof. What they do in other counties and cities is they bring the state, the federal, nonprofit, and the local social services and health and mental hygiene and those types of agencies. And the MVA actually participates for identification cards because it's a convenient way to get people who otherwise don't have great access to services under one roof at one time. So I would support Homeless Resource Day, and I would support a homeless shelter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody care to use their 30 seconds? Ms. Nash.
Thank you, and you have no idea how ecstatic I am that this issue is being brought up. So I want to talk about affordable housing. You may know that I'm very passionate about the homeless issue, but I also think that we need to look at affordable housing as we move forward. It is one thing to provide the stopgap, which, make no mistake, is an absolute necessity. And as a city, we must move forward with an all-weather shelter, but we also need to move forward with affordable housing options. And it's a very complex issue, and it certainly requires innovation. But we must partner with the private sector and offer rental units as well as purchasing units so that folks can, in fact, transition from homelessness to affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else going to use their 30 seconds? In that case, we'll move on to Mr. Daniels. Mr. Daniels, the 148-acre Hargett Farm is a big open space. It cost us $80 million. It's sat relatively unused. I know some of it has been dedicated to certain uses, but what's your vision for the property?
Thank you, Cliff. My vision of the Hargett Farm is impulse buys are never a good buy. We bought the farm, we paid 3 times more than the developer paid for it. We bought it without developing a plan for what we wanted to do with it and no means of supporting that plan had we developed it. So it was a bad choice, but that being said, we own that farm now, so we need to do something with it. We can't afford to sell it, we can't use it because of the bonding restrictions, so we need to put a team together to look at our options. I think that we've already dedicated a school site. I feel that we can also partner creatively with some organizations to develop an aquatics facility, some ball fields, and some hiking trails, it may be necessary to carve off a piece of it, because 148 acres is a huge farm. Think about the Baker Park is only a 44-acre park.
Thank you. And I can see Ms. Kazumchak, would you like to use 30 seconds to respond?
Thank you. The Hargett property is one of my passions. I don't believe we made a mistake in purchasing that. Land is not an infinite resource. People need a place to play. We need not to be going down the road for our children to play soccer or swim. And the Hargett property can provide us with that type of development. If we allow it to develop with houses, we will have so many cars on those roads that you won't possibly be able to get by. So I do believe Hargett needs to be developed as a huge park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right. Next question goes to Alan Imhoff. Mr. Imhoff, negotiations over police contracts have occasionally been contentious over the years. When the next round of bargaining comes up in 2015, what are the most crucial elements, or the most crucial element of the deal you believe should be sought?
I'm assuming you're talking with the police?
Yes, sorry, please.
Okay.
Didn't I say that?
You just, it's
Oh,
okay.
sorry.
For me, with negotiations for any next contract with any employee, the city needs to be more realistic in how it approaches retirement benefits as well as health care. And we need to be more in line with other jurisdictions. We cannot afford to keep going the way we have been with up to 100% costs being borne by the city. Most every organization that I am aware of has some employee contribution. And I think that is one of the things that we need to do to bring ourselves back to a fiscal responsible manner in which we handle our employees, all our employees.
Thank you very much. Anybody care to use their 30 seconds? You're all being very cautious. Okay. All right, our next question goes to Donna Kazumchak. Ms. Kazumchak, one thing that came up in this election was an LLC loophole that afforded one person the ability to theoretically contribute unlimited amounts of money to a single candidate. Now that's being tackled, it's being dealt with, the loophole is going to be closed. What other changes to campaign finance laws would you support to create greater transparency for voters?
I think that transparency is one of those things that the candidates have to be committed to. There are ways of getting around almost every law. So unfortunately, you can't write laws to cover everything. Campaign finance reform is, I think closing that loophole was very important. I thank you for doing that. That was a great job. But again, we need to watch each other, and we need to have the integrity ourselves to know that we are accepting or not accepting campaign donations from many sources or large amounts. I am proud that I have the most small contributions of any campaign. A lot of people have been giving me $20, $25, and that's how I've gotten through this campaign, and that support means so much to me. I think that that's what you need to do. The small donations really mean that you have a large amount of support. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Would anybody care to use that 30 seconds? All right, we have 4 questions left. Now we move on to Katie Nash. Ms. Nash, you've probably heard this question before, but I'm going to ask it again. The city is dealing with ways to mitigate blighted and vacant properties. It's been discussed at great length. We've talked about it a lot in nearly every forum I'm sure that you've been to, and it's resulted in a comprehensive suite of potential null rules. Are you satisfied with what's been done? Can we do more?
Yeah, I think that the current Board of Aldermen and Mayor have done an excellent job of identifying the problem. I think the task force made a series of recommendations that are moving forward now. Of the 9 solutions that they presented, I spoke about this last night at the NAC meeting, most of them are resulting in sort of a data collection, proactive code enforcement, and I think if we're going to move forward to that, we have to look at our current resources and we need to look at our current tools in the toolbox. And certainly there is the opportunity for us to implement some tracking and some sort of performance metrics on making sure that we're making improvements on how we do our code enforcement and empowering our officers to do more with what they have, and certainly even consider investing. I think moving forward, we need to make sure that we involve the lending community. Some of the issues that came up involved foreclosures and who owns the homes and at what point do they own the homes. And so moving forward, I'd like to see a little bit more conversation involving the lending community and how they play a role in the solution.
Thank you very much. Anybody like to use 30 seconds? Okay, Mr. O'Connor, you got to it first, and then we'll go to Mr. Bokey.
The last part of that question was, can we do more? And the answer is, of course we can do more. We can always do more, because I think that's our job. I think our job is to put in the recommendations of the Blight and Vacant Property Task Force the way we have. We've implemented receivership. You might have noticed that on North Market Street, a certain restaurant is beginning to do some work. And I believe that it's because of the effort that we put into saying that this is a serious issue and we're going to undertake it. That work continues. We evaluate. If we find that the tools that we have don't work, then we develop new tools. We never stop addressing the problems that come before us as a city.
Many thanks. We'll move down the end of the table, Mr. Bokey.
I'd like to commend city officials for, I think, setting up and providing the tools to be able to look at this issue. And obviously the next step, as the comments earlier have mentioned, is about implementation. And I think as it comes to implementation, I do want to, again, echo the other comments that I think we need to set up a system of public measurements in terms of how are we doing on this issue, where is the exact problem in this issue, but how we set up data collection, as you used the term earlier, and a series of metrics. I think these are things that we can apply to programs across the city in terms of how do we measure where we are, what is working in terms of being effectiveness in moving forward.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. We have 3 questions left to go. 6 candidates sitting on there, 30 seconds. Mr. O'Connor, tourism is a critical component to the city's economy, and if there's one thing downtown business owners have told us they would like to see walking the streets, it's more tourists. What is the city's responsibility when it comes to encouraging visitors to Frederick? Is enough being done? Are there areas for improvement? Is this a place we should be investing public dollars, or should we leave it up to private non-profit organizations?
Tourism is one of the great clean industries that we have at our disposal. And the benefit that we have in the city of Frederick is that we have such a marvelous and rich history that spans, if you line it up, the history of this country. There is Revolutionary War history here, there is Civil War history here. You take it through every era, and we have it in the city of Frederick. The benefit that the city can provide to that is we have to be the biggest champions of it, because our downtown is the jewel of what makes tourism great in the city of Frederick. And so our focus has to be on making sure that we maintain a clean downtown, a safe downtown, a downtown that tourists and visitors will want to come to. The issue has been talked about a lot in terms of what's missing in terms of attracting tourism to Frederick, and it is a downtown hotel. The market study has been done, and it's been determined that there is a market for a downtown hotel, and the private sector is going to build that hotel. In fact, the process that we're engaged in now of working with a consultant, we're beginning to see some rumblings in the private sector that that's coming.
Very good, thank you. I see Mr. Cowell's hand. Ms. Dacey, is that your hand? Okay, sorry, I couldn't see it. Okay, Mr. Cowell and Mr. Dacey. Did anybody else want to chime in? Ms. Cowell.
Well, the Frederick Downtown Partnership is doing a wonderful job promoting tourism. The city, the Board of Aldermen, and the mayor should continue to support that program. Also, one of the problems that I've noticed, and I've heard from residents that live downtown, is that there's weeds and excess vegetation growing. We need to form a committee that wants to tackle that and make it more beautiful for folks that want to come back over and over again. Also, programs like the Alive at 5, First Fridays and First Saturdays. First Fridays and Saturdays is a joint partnership, and it's attracting a lot of people. So I do support the Frederick Downtown Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dacey.
Well, I think tourism is great. I think we need to do everything we can to make sure we get more tourists downtown. I think the key is a downtown hotel. We've been talking about a downtown hotel since I was swinging a Little League bat in Frederick. So I think over the next 4 years, it's time to partner with a developer and get a hotel built. I think we're missing out huge opportunity on day trip, people that come up for the day and would stay overnight, but there's a lack of facilities downtown. It's a beautiful, walkable downtown. I go across the state, and so I like to say Frederick is the best kept secret across the state, but let's not make it a secret. Let's let people know what wonderful things we have downtown and bring in more tourists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Daniels, you'd like to use your 30 seconds?
Yes, the completion of Carroll Creek Phase 2 in a hotel would add greatly to the foot traffic we need to support those small businesses. It would also create a walking loop along Carroll Creek and back down Patrick Street for additional small businesses. Talking to the business owners downtown as I walk through, I get 2 complaints. One complaint is there are no public restrooms. People tell me on first Saturdays that it would be nice if they could change a diaper on their baby without having to go into a restaurant. So public restrooms have to be something that we consider as we move forward. And the other complaint is getting out of the parking garages at the end of the day when one of the machines break. We need to address having someone there. But other than that, I think that's the way we get more tourists.
Great. Mr. Schmidt?
I just want to add one thing to this. I think that this is another area that the city is kind of holding the burden for the entire county, where if you come to Frederick, I meet all sorts of people who end up moving here, and they're not necessarily moving into the city. They're moving up to Frederick so that they can use the services, et cetera. And I think that if there's going to be any money, the question was, should we be investing? And I think there is, if there's any investment that needs to be shared with the city and the county, that we should hold that whole burden.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We'll move on now to Kenny Russell. Speaking of things to do, swimming. Should the city pursue an aquatic centre? If so, why and how should such a project use public funds? If not, why not? And is there something you prefer we do instead?
If I said I didn't want to pursue a swimming facility, I think Alderman O'Connor would smack me. This is something that is coming as a vision for potentially what might be happening on the Hargett Farm. I think we are lacking in a swimming facility, an aquatic center. As with any big giant project like that or a hotel, it's obviously going to take a lot of partners putting their heads together, putting investments together to make this thing happen. We are starting to have some conversations with different partners about that, but the logistics of how it all may come to bear are really yet to be developed. I think it's important that we as a city play a role in that to, as we are doing with the hotel, kind of set the table for what it is we would like to see, and then work with the investment community, with developers, with real estate holdings, and investors that want to be a part of this thing to make it happen, so that our kids don't have to travel to swim at swim meets, and also there's a therapeutic need for swimming pools here in the city of Frederick.
Very good, thank you. Would anybody care to use? Excellent. Mr. Ember, 30 seconds.
I would support looking at an aquatic center. The school system is cutting back on its swimming program, has been for years, and probably will continue in that same regards. When you look at swimming, the individual, not the team, is the one who benefits. And it's one of the great sports that you can do for the individual. And all we have to do is look at some of the problems we have with obesity in our children today. Hence, an aquatic center could be a process for the Hargett Farm.
Thank you very much. Well, we only have one left, and that's Ms. Russell. Sitting on her 30 seconds, hoping this last question's a good one, right? Okay, Mr. Schmidt, let's make it a good one. Now we've heard all about the Golden Mile, Golden Mile, Golden Mile. Okay, which area of the city, other than the Golden Mile, is it critical for Frederick's government to focus on for revitalization? And if you could choose one to make a priority for your term in office, just one, which one would it be?
Choose just one. All right, I'll talk about East Frederick. That's where my family's had their building there for a long time. Kind of along that East Street corridor. I think we need to be focused on that. We talk a lot about how we focus on downtown. It's a major economic driver and it's important, but what we need to be doing is, as we brought in over the last 4 years, a lot of developments. We've done a lot of annexing, or a lot of annexes have been requested. And the next step needs to be infill. And the perfect place for that is along that east side. There's a lot of, whether or not the hotel goes there, I was speaking with somebody last night at the NAC forum that sat on one of the committees that was looking for locations through the lens of historic preservation. And they said that putting it on that side of the city would protect a lot of the sight lines and the fact that we have the cluster spires, et cetera. So I think that it's a good place for us to develop. We need to be focusing on there because we can protect the way our city looks and the character of our city, but we can provide more jobs, especially in the tech world.
Thank you very much. Ms. Russell.
Sure. The city has small area planning tools that we're moving forward with. In the comprehensive plan, we've identified areas such as Jefferson Street, Rosemont Avenue corridor, East Frederick Rising, areas that are going to be focused on revitalization. I think East Street is a really good one to look at because our Rails and Trails project is now completed in its design. As that moves up East Street and that corridor starts to redevelop, things are really going to start happening there. But it's important that we look comprehensively, and again with our comprehensive plan, to use the tools that we are putting in place so that we do this in a smart way.
Very good, thank you. That's it. Everybody's used their 30 seconds. Excellent, everybody's answered the question. For the general round, if you take a look at the clock, we're actually a little behind time. So in order to not keep these ladies and gentlemen too long and to try and keep into the schedule, we're going to move into the big question. And we're going to go for 30 seconds, I think, on this one. We're just going to make this a lightning round, okay? All right? Okay, bit of a challenge, throwing you a little bit of a curveball, and let's get going. We're going to go in random order. The order has been pre-selected prior to this. I guarantee it's random. And the question is, give me the high points on growth in the city. Starting with Mr. Bokey, 30 seconds.
30 seconds, growth in the city. We know traffic is a huge concern. We have to, as mentioned earlier, depending on where you are in the city, those traffic concerns can vary. So I've been a huge supporter on the city's planning commission that we ensure that we have adequate infrastructure and that we first meet the needs of our existing neighborhoods when it comes to infrastructure, whether it's traffic, whether it's ensuring that our sidewalks have a repair schedule, whether it's ensuring that, again, blighted properties, that we have a comprehensive strategy of implementation for addressing blighted properties that is not just in the downtown, but it exists throughout the city. These are, that's my general philosophy. We could talk an hour on that, but I got 30 seconds.
We could, 30 seconds, I apologize. Mr. O'Connor.
The moment you asked the question, I started thinking about the annexations that are coming and the ones that have happened and the process that has to be applied to those, which is, do they fit with our comprehensive plan? That's a growth decision. Do they make economic sense for the city of Frederick? Is the infrastructure that we're going to need in order to welcome those residents appropriately into the city of Frederick so they feel like they're fully integrated in the city is very important, because that's the thing that residents expect for their tax dollars. They expect services. We're working on the 4th annexation in our administration. I've been able to support 2 of them based on that criteria. I could not support 2 based on that criteria. It's important that we keep all things in balance.
Very good. This is exciting. Great. Okay, Ms. Kazuche.
I'm proud to have sat on the board that put together the first adequate public facilities ordinance in the city. I think that it needs some work. I think that we need to tweak it a bit. We need to be sure that developments have adequate public facilities for all growth. And those include not just roads and schools, but police, code enforcement, parks, planning. Every time we add something to the city, we add more services, and I think that we need to make that part of the public facilities ordinance.
Very good. Mr. Dacey.
Well, growth is one of the main reasons I decided to get into this race. I think over the next 4 years, the Board of Aldermen is going to have a lot to say about how the city grows and changes forever. If you think about it, once you start growing on this newly annexed land, it's really difficult to make a change. I think we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure that we need in order to accommodate all this growth. Frederick is going to grow. Growth, I think, is a positive on the net, but I think we need to make sure that we do address the needs of the current residents with the adequate infrastructure. When I grew up here, it was less than 30,000 people. Now there's 65,000, so it's more than twice. It's more than doubled, and we're using the same roads, if you think about it, essentially. So we need to make sure we focus on infrastructure. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Schmidt.
Well, so far we all touched on it, and everybody else will say it, adequate infrastructure. Hands down, that's the high point. The other piece is not just smart growth, but intelligent growth. It needs to be sustainable. And that doesn't just mean that we add solar, which is great. And I have a lot of experience in the green building world. And I've had it, there's a lot of federal money that we can bring here to the city that we're doing for residents right now that can come in and make it a sustainable city.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Imhoff?
Well, if I remember the question correctly, it was the high point of growth, correct?
Correct.
For me, the high point of growth for the city of Frederick is something like Riverside Park, where we have a major employment center. It was well thought out and well planned for. Wells Fargo came from out of the county into the city. SAIC, whose name is now changed to Leidos, I believe, or Leidos, is there as well, with a large campus being planned. If intelligent growth is going to be done, that type of park needs to be part of that planning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniels.
Yeah, actually, in my opening statements, I addressed that the reason I'm running for alderman is to help manage this growth as we move forward. And the high point in growth is in the rearview mirror. I'm looking forward to growth. We can grow by annexations. We can grow organically, internal. Smart growth dictates that we use infill and redevelopment first before we develop our green space. And I would like to see more effort applied to those areas, like the small area plan on the Golden Mile and East Frederick Rising, which is somewhere kind of getting pushed aside. But I think that smart growth is absolutely the way we should go, and infill is the way to do it.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Russell?
I think everybody's interpreting the question differently. Perhaps Wegmans is the high point of growth. We've passed a small area plan for the Golden Mile. That was important. The APFO has been reviewed and we've upheld that. The East Frederick Rising Visioning Plan was passed by this administration. We're looking at passing a complete streets policy, which will mean that every street that's built will accommodate all modes of transportation, not only driving, but walking and cycling. These are important things for interconnectivity. And our focus has shifted to mixed-use development, which is really the wave of the future. And that's, I think, our pipeline.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Cowell?
I'm really surprised no one's mentioned this already, but with more growth means we need more police protection. We need to have a fully staffed police force. We also need to attract high-paying jobs for our very educated citizenry. We also need to provide services for the increased growth, and especially as government, we need to be fiscally responsible with the increased tax revenue.
Very good. Finally, Ms. Nash?
Closing it out. So rather than saying me too, I've been passionate that we need to talk about how we finance growth. And I know that, growth means different things to different people, but this election cycle, it really seems to mean traffic. And so when we look forward to traffic, certainly the city of Frederick is placed under much heavier sort of burdens because the state funding has sort of decreased, and of course federal funding, we don't need to talk about DC at all. So when we look towards the future and we look towards how we're financing our roads, we certainly need innovation. And other jurisdictions have implemented infrastructure banking. It can be called different things like road clubs, bonding, I've heard. But essentially we need to look to the future, and rather than build houses first and then roads, we need to look to doing it differently.
Excellent. Thank you for demonstrating mastery of the soundbite there. I greatly appreciate you being adaptable enough to take on 30 seconds on the road. We get back to our unique questions now.